For those of you who don't know me, my name is Seta Saleh, and I'm married to George, and I have 2 teenagers at home. Furthermore, I was born overseas in a multilingual family who spoke 5 languages concurrently at any given time. So, if you hear me making sentence constructions that do not belong in the English language, just remember that I'm thinking in one language and speaking in the other. And also lately, for some reason, I've gotten to pronouncing English words that I've used for 20, 30 years in new and interesting ways. So when I see my teenagers start smiling, I know I'm doing one of those. So anyway, last week was my birthday, and I turned 44. Thank you. For those of you who have already gone through your 40s, you know how exciting and wonderful those years can be. And for those of you who are not yet in your 4th decade, I highly recommend it. Of course, a few things seem to change when you hit your 40s. For one, gravity begins to show you that it will be the ultimate winner. And also sometimes, and this happened to me, so I don't know if it happens to everybody else, you kind of move along a few dress sizes before you know what's happening, with your metabolism. Oh, I can't eat like that anymore. So, but it can also be a time of wonderful reflection on your life that you've already lived, and thinking about what God has done in your life up to this point and what He's doing moving forward. And some of you might say, no, Seta, my 40s weren't as you say they were. They were hectic. I was constantly on the go, and I did not have the comfort of reflecting. Maybe I'm in such a contemplative mood because 2009 is also my 20th wedding anniversary. So, or maybe, age and life circumstances have nothing to do with it. It's just that I was preparing to share with you today on wisdom, and my mind naturally went along those lines. I spent much time researching and pondering the question of wisdom. I thought about, how wisdom is connected to everything else. Is it connected to age? Does wisdom come with age? Is it independent of age? How does one acquire it? And so before I opened my Bible, I thought, let me see what the secular world out there thinks about wisdom. So obviously, what would you do if you want to know that? I Googled it. And here's some of the things I found. I wanted to share these with you. Psychologists define wisdom as the coordination of knowledge and experience deliberately used to improve the well-being of a person. They believe that a wise person can discern the core of important problems, has self-knowledge, is sincere, acts consistently with her ethical and moral beliefs, and is a person that others go to for advice. According to Islam, the Quran teaches that Muhammad and all the preceding prophets were chosen by God at times of political and moral instability to represent God's wisdom to His creation. Confucius stated that wisdom can be learned by 3 methods. One is reflection, which was the noblest. The second was imitation, which was the easiest. And the third is experience, which is the bitterest. Interesting. Buddha taught that a wise person is endowed with good bodily conduct, good verbal conduct, and good mental conduct. And a wise person does actions that are unpleasant to do, but give good results, and doesn't do actions that are pleasant to do, but give bad results. Okay. In Taoism, practical wisdom may be described as knowing what to say and when to say it. Aristotle defines wisdom as knowledge of causes, why things exist in a particular fashion. We really need to spend time to figure that one out. Plato, on the other hand, in his dialogues, mentions the virtue of wisdom as knowledge about the good and the courage to act accordingly. One of my favorites was Socrates, who claimed to know that he did not know what wisdom was, but that he was very certain that many of his fellow citizens who had ideas about it were wrong. And then finally, I looked up dictionary.com. And the description of wisdom in dictionary.com was the quality or state of being wise, knowledge of what is true or right, coupled with just judgment as to action, discernment, or insight. So you can see that there's some truth in all of these things, but before I go on and tell you what biblical wisdom is, I have to tell you my all-time favorite quote that I read, which came from Dear Abby. And this is what she said. Wisdom doesn't automatically come with age. Nothing does except wrinkles. It's true, some wines improve with age, but only if the grapes were good in the first place. So, what is biblical wisdom? In the Old Testament, the Hebrew word for wise is chokmah. That's the word I have on the board there, if you'd like the spelling, which means masterful understanding, skill, or expertise. Outside of the Proverbs in biblical texts, chokmah is used to describe the mental and physical skills of craftsmen, artisans, and singers, and people who had particular areas of expertise and skill, and they were considered to be very knowledgeable in these areas. For example, the artisans who built the tabernacle in Exodus 35, or the ones who built Solomon's temple in 1 Chronicles 22, were all considered to have chokmah. They were considered to be wise. Therefore, the concept of wisdom is inseparable from that of knowledge. Whenever you think of wisdom, you have to think of knowledge, because it is very hard to know what the right thing to do is. Let me rephrase it. It is very hard to do the right thing without knowing what that is. So one has to have knowledge so then he can apply it skillfully to be considered wise. So the definition of wisdom is knowledge skillfully applied. In the book of Proverbs, Proverbs being the major theme, wisdom being the major theme of Proverbs, it's used over 125 times in this book. Because the aim of Proverbs is to help us acquire and apply godly wisdom to the decisions of everyday life. You may have noticed that wisdom literature in the Old Testament, which includes which books? Can anybody tell me? Besides Proverbs. Go further. Job, Ecclesiastes, those are both wisdom books. All these books wrestle with some of the most difficult life questions. As their writers and people who are in these books try to understand life's problems from God's point of view. Remember the story of Job. Remember how Satan took away everything he had. He took away his family. He took away his wealth. He took away his health. And Job was struggling to understand, and he was struggling with this life question of how this could happen to him when he loved God so much and he served God so faithfully. So first and foremost in biblical wisdom, biblical wisdom looks at life's problems and seeks to understand them from a biblical viewpoint, or God's point of view. You may not be aware of the fact that in ancient times, kings and rulers had groups of wise men that they consulted anytime they needed advice on what to do. In the Near Eastern culture, every ruler had one of these councils. The book of Proverbs is somewhat similar to that literature in that it recognizes that observation, by seeing things and learning from how things work, instruction, by having it taught from other people,